Join me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast to hear fascinating stories every week from the inspiring people behind the science. Find out how Bibi made her way from one of the poorest parts of Spain to being editor-in-chief at two of the most prestigious chemistry organisations in the world. Hi, Bibi. Thanks for joining me today. I'm looking forward to talking to you. So for everyone listening, we've got Bibiana Campos Ciejo here with me. And if I've pronounced that wrong, then I'll hand over to Bibi to say it properly. In the meantime, Bibi's an esteemed writer, editor-in-chief of Chemistry World and Chemical and Engineering News for two of the world-leading chemical societies. And it's a real privilege to have you here talking to us today, Bibi. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited.
I'm glad you are. So you've seen a lot when it comes to the cutting edge science wise. But before we go into any of that, I just want to delve a little bit more into what goes behind the writing, a bit more about you perhaps. And we know that you were born in Spain and you grew up there and you were educated there degree wise. And before you did that, something must have triggered you to be interested in science. And I wanted if you could talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I come from Galicia, which is in the northwest of Spain. It's one of the poorest areas in the country. It is an area where we had a lot of fishermen because we are right on the coast. So it's a fantastic place. But yeah, I mean, my interest in science, I guess that it started because I had really good science teachers, especially in secondary school. I had phenomenal science teachers, biology teachers. They were fantastic. We had maths, physics as well. Really inspirational people, very eloquent individuals, very committed to teaching science. And before that, when I was in primary school, actually, I was in a pilot school. So they were trying a lot of different educational methodologies with us, with the students. So I think that helped a lot in that we were exposed to lab work and field experiments and stuff like that perhaps other kids were not even encouraged to do. So I would say that from the primary school and the experimentation that we were doing into secondary school, having those really strong personalities, very committed science teachers, that was fantastic. And then when I went to university, I mean that was really good. I think I had the background and the basis to be and encouraged into chemistry, which is a really interesting science. So so that's where it came from. Yeah.
Do you remember a particular field experiment that you really enjoyed?
So our biology teacher, he was fantastic. He would just come into the classroom and start talking about lots of different topics, and he would just talk. And I was just fascinated by the way that he saw the world. But he would very often take us out within the town. So we would go to the beach, for example. So we would be looking at rocks there, and he would be talking a little bit, certainly, a lot about biology, but then a little bit about geology, and letting us learn almost without knowing that we were learning. We have also an area within the town that is very marshy. So there's otters and then ducks and all kinds of wildlife there. So he would take us into the kind of like little trucks and they just talk about different plant species and the animals and and all those kinds of things. So it was really nice, and it was a privilege that he was there to do that with us. I certainly enjoyed it very much, and to this day I really I remember him, and I kind of like keep following what he's doing. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
What's his name?
Carlos Valles.
Carlos Valles. Well,
Yes.
that.
Yeah, it's interesting because he was also somebody who was very involved in politics. Actually, our chemistry teacher was very involved in politics as well. And I really admire that about them, that, in a way, I knew that they were involved in politics because of, my family situation, and I knew what was going on. They never kind of like talk about politics to us, but it was something that I appreciated a lot. That, I mean, again, they were very committed to science, but they were strong personalities, very eloquent individuals, and I love how they just talked about the world. It was, fascinating.
So you said they were involved in politics, but your family didn't talk about politics to you.
No. The teachers did not talk about politics
Okay,
to
fine.
us. Like my dad was really involved in politics, so he knew the teachers, and he knew what kind of like parties they were, I guess, that supporting and those kinds of things, and he was opposing parties in this case. So it was a little bit confrontational from that perspective. But of course, the teachers, Carlos, Valles, and others in the school, they wouldn't talk about that. But I love to have that insight, from my family, and I guess that I was a kind of a mature kid and really interested in that aspect of things. I come from an area that has a different language, and there's it's not like the Basque Country or Catalonia, where there's a strong separatist movement, but there's claims of independence and that kind of thing. So it's really interesting and controversial. So it was nice to be informed about that.
Excellent. You've never felt tempted to go down the political route?
No, never. I don't have the personality for that. No.
I disagree entirely. I think you'd be perfect.
I think I'm a very naive person. I think I would get hurt a lot. Yeah.
I think you've got a lot to offer from a policy perspective, Bibi.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that.
So you started. Tell us about the magazine that you started at, your first gig, as it were. How did you get into that?
Yeah. So I had been working with a society in the journals area. So that's kind of like as a technical editor. So you apply the house style and all that kind of thing. So that was kind of like how I started in publishing. This was in Sheffield, in the north of the UK, and it was the European Respiratory Society. So for them, I was doing kind of like journal work. But then after that, I moved into magazines, into kind of like the bright side. And I mean, I say that in a kind of like very silly way, I guess, but it's a very creative space. I think media and the kinds of publications that I have worked in, that I would describe as magazines. So this was with a commercial company called Advanced Star Communications, which it has been bought by a number of organizations, including Informa, and I don't know what the status is currently, but they had events and a number of publications in lots of different areas, but very strong in the like pharmacy, certainly science, but like pharmaceutical technology and that kind of thing. So I became from working in journals, I became the editor-in-chief of 3 magazines. One was European title for pharmaceutical technology, and then the Asia Pacific title as well, and then one for pharmaceutical technologists. So it was for people working in that field, and then different demographics within that. And I was there for about a year or so. So it was really interesting. I met my boss at the time, Peter Houston, who actually really, I don't know, he took a chance on me because I really didn't have any journalistic experience. I mean, I understood, publishing, but from the point of view of how you publish a journal, and magazine publishing is very, very different. But we got on.
What do you
Sorry?
think? What do you think the main differences are between the journals and the magazine?
Yeah, I mean, in journals, you have peer review for a start, which we were doing actually in magazines. But I think that there's a lot of differences in terms of when you're publishing for a journal, you have the whole peer review system. Typically, you submit your paper, or it is commissioned from you, but it is about research that you have done in an area. So you're presenting that research, and it is in a way very prescriptive, because you have a title and an abstract, and you have methodology, and you have, materials, and your disclaimers, and, any kind of conflicts of interest. It is very formulaic in a way. And I think when you move into the magazines area, that kind of like set formula breaks apart, because, we can talk about research in a lot of different ways. You ideally find a narrative, you find a way of telling that story in a way that is engaging and a little bit different. You can look at the human aspect of research, for example, and tell a personal story, or you can talk about a trend and how a field is growing or developing. So there's a lot of different ways of doing that. We don't have so many tables and things like that, or you can have, illustrative photographs of people and those kinds of things. So I think that there's the significant difference that, we have to have a story to tell, a reason why you should tell the world about that. And it has to be enticing and appealing and a compelling read, because you're not reading that so much for information, but more so for entertainment as well, right? While, with the journals, again, you read it because you probably have to find a methodology that you need to apply in your next experiment. So, lots of differences like that. So yes, I didn't have any experience of publishing or magazine publishing, and Peter and we really got on like a house on fire. And I mean, to this day, I adore him. He's a brilliant guy doing really interesting things in media, and we worked together for a year, and we had a lot of fun. And in fact, I'm still working on a consultancy basis with some of the people that I used to work with at Advanced Star, which they're all together, and they have it's not so small, like an average or like medium-sized media company in the north of the UK. So that was a fantastic experience, and yeah, I made a lot of friends that I still have to this day. So yeah, that was a really good transition. That then, I guess, that set my career on a specific path.
Mm-hmm. And then you said before that you were particularly orientated towards chemistry, and I've kind of jumped over you doing your masters in the UK. But was that the point that you went more towards chemistry, or was it before that?
It was before that. I did most of my degree in the UK. So like the first 4 years I did in Santiago de Compostela in the north of Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to the UK because I got an Erasmus grant. So actually, I don't know if they exist anymore with the UK, because the UK is not part of Europe any longer, and we can talk about that until the cows come home. That's the worst decision ever in my view. Yes, it was the Erasmus program. I went to the UK for a year to do what would have been my last year in Spain, and then it became my last year of degree in the UK. Although there's a significant difference as well, because in Spain my degree was 5 years, and in the UK the degree is 3 years. And then after that last year, I had a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed that Erasmus year. And then applied to do a PhD, actually not a master's. I went in directly into doing a PhD. And then I stayed forever. I stayed for 17 years after that, because I really love the UK. To me, is my I would say second home after Spain. So yeah. And I think, doing the PhD was a fantastic experience. I don't think I would have had the opportunities that I have had through my career if I hadn't done it. But it is difficult, and I think people have to go into doing a PhD with their eyes open and understand that it's a big commitment. It's 3 years of research. And I'll tell you a funny story. When I when I went to interview for my PhD, I really didn't know what a PhD was, because my family were not academic. So I am me and my brothers and my sister were the first generation in our family to go to university. So we're first generation, which I didn't even know what that was either. I'm the first person in my family to have a PhD. So when I went to do the interview, there was a line of people who were applying for the PhD position, and they were all like, with their suits and ties and all prepared, and they had notes and all those kinds of things. And I turned up in jeans and a jumper because I didn't realize how important this was. I thought it was just an informal conversation about, you know, am I kind of like ready to go into this kind of new program of study, and then I got it, and it was great. And then of course I told my dad, I'm going to do a PhD, and he said, and what is that? And I said, well, you go into the lab, you do experimental work for about 3 years or so, and then you write a book, and then at the end they call you doctor. And then he said, oh, that sounds like a good deal. I said, yeah, they pay you for it and everything. And he said, okay, well, let's do that. And so he didn't know either.
Great description.
And yeah, and but the interesting thing is that my parents always encouraged us to study, and although he really didn't understand what the value of a PhD was, from an academic perspective, when I finished, I printed multiple copies, and I bound, and I gave him one. He couldn't understand any of it, only my name, because of course it was written in English, only my name at the beginning. And I gave him a copy for him to keep, and he cried. Actually, he was really emotional about the fact that I had achieved that level of I guess that academic achievement, if I can repeat myself. And I'm the first person in my family to go up to that level. So yeah, that was really, I
He
don't
was
know. It
very
was a really
proud.
moving moment. Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Is he still around? I don't even know if your parents.
No. He died a few years ago. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. My thesis is still around somewhere in my
good.
where my parents used to live. Nobody is throwing it away. So yeah.
That's good. Um, so then you've you were at Advanced Star, as you said, editor-in-chief of 3 titles. And then at some point it became time to move on from there. And even though being editor-in-chief and having a great time and meeting these people, what was it that made you think, gosh, I think I need something new?
Mm. I so this was purely by chance that I saw that the Royal Society of Chemistry were looking for an editor in chief for Chemistry World, and I had a really good experience with the RSC when I was at university doing my PhD, because they would, the volunteers would organize events. I remember in one case there was a big lecture about beer making, so they had people coming from a brewery, and of course there were samples and things like that, but explaining the process of making beer. And there were a couple of events that they organized that were absolutely fantastic, and they were reaching out to us to become members and that kind of thing. So I always thought, I would love to work for an organization like that. And then I saw the alert coming into my email, and I applied for it. And of course, I had the chemistry degree as well. So, from my perspective, it would be a nice way of applying that. And then I got the job, which I didn't expect to get, but it was really nice. I was very pleased with myself. So yeah. And then I ended up being there for 6 years, and to this day, the RSC is an organization that I admire very much. Certainly, the organization, the way it's run, its leadership. I have a lot of still friends like yourself there. So yeah, it has a big place in my heart.
Yeah, it's a great place. Then we should make a disclaimer or something. Yes, we have worked together.
Yes.
So you are now editor. Were you editor in chief? Was that your title there? Editor at Chemistry World, because it was Chemistry World is the member magazine for the Royal Society of Chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more. It was a magazine for sure then, and I think it must have had a website at the time.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Evolved into more of a digital portfolio. The
Mm-hmm.
magazine still runs, of course.
Yeah.
So editor-in-chief, editor, publisher, what I can't remember what
Yeah,
you
I started as editor in chief, and then by the time I finished it, I was editor in chief and publisher, because I was also responsible for Education in Chemistry,
was.
which is the magazine for educators in chemistry, like the certainly undergraduate and secondary school level. And then at the time we also had a magazine for students, which I don't know if it exists anymore, but those three titles, and also the SERB, which is the Journal of Chemical Education that the RSC runs. All those four properties or titles, if you want to call them that, they were under my responsibility. So yes, I was the publisher there.
Yeah. And Chemistry World, very much the flagship magazine. Now, how on earth did you choose stories? Because I mean, I've seen it, the inbox is full. Dear editor, this is very interesting. And you've already said about, the art of choosing a story that's valid for entertainment purposes, but is interesting as well, and then presenting it in a way that people are engaged in reading it. So what were some of the better ones? Let's put it like that. What were your favorites? Do you remember any?
I think, I mean, speaking generally, I think that certainly there is an art to telling a story, which is, like the craft of journalists and writers in general. But, when you're talking about a specific field, and in this case, a field of science like chemistry, then there is a kind of like another level that is layered on top of that, which, it has to brings value to members of the chemical sciences community. So from that perspective, the team there are certainly professionals from the point of view of their journalism, writing skills, and all those kinds of things. The majority of them also have a background in science, and many of them in chemistry specifically, and many of them at the highest level, like PhDs in chemistry, and even I think some postdocs as well. So they bring that expertise where they have knowledge of an area of not just science. Of course, they know the chemistry, but also within the chemistry. So they will know about analytical chemistry and what is hot and what isn't in that space. They will know about the business of chemistry as well. So they will know about the latest trends. What is happening in terms of AI and all those kinds of things. Who are the movers and shakers? Who are the early career scientists that are already kind of like making some waves and changing the way that chemistry is done, and perhaps reaching beyond their kind of like a sphere of influence, right? So if they are in the UK, are they actually getting opportunities to go abroad and talk at conferences and stuff like that? So in a way, you rely a lot on the knowledge and the expertise and the contacts that the team have, because that is something that they have developed over many years as students of chemistry, and then as they went on. So there's a lot that comes out of that, and very often you get kind of cold calls or emails where somebody says, you should really write a story about X, and we pay a lot of attention to that while I was at the RSC, and then at the American Chemical Society after that, where there's some people who are really very well connected, and they know what is happening, and not also what is happening, but what is going to happen. So from that perspective, there's those are the kinds of contacts and people that we kind of nurture very, very well, because they have a vision of the field that is really interesting to us. So from that perspective, that's the way of that it works. There is the journalism side, which you have to nail, right? Independence and all that kind of thing, and then the science side, the chemistry side, which is where a lot of value for readers comes from. So yeah, that's the way it works.
Was there anything in particular that you really relished covering or writing about or including in the magazine?
I don't know. I guess that there's nothing specifically that comes to mind. I mean, I'm just thinking about the last 10, 15 years. I guess that my favorite stories are the ones where there's people involved, and the voices of those people are kind of like what carries the narrative. I mean, I like interviews, for example, a lot. Yeah, those are the kinds of stories that I like, because I like to hear a little bit about the person, and then about their science, and how they got into that. So yeah, those are the kinds of stories that I like best. Yeah.
And I feel like we've before we move you on to the ACS, there were some various life moments while you were at the RSC, the birth of your children,
Uh-huh.
and then before that, meeting and marrying your now husband.
Uh-huh.
You met him at work, is that right?
Uh, that was when I was finishing my PhD. Yes, he was working at the university, but for a different
Okay.
faculty in a different department in the humanities. Yeah. And my kids, I had twins in 2011. So that was a few years before I left the RSC. So that was quite interesting to to handle that, as well as all the the work responsibilities. But I actually remember that. So my kids were born on Valentine's Day, so that was 14th of February 2011. And about 2-3 weeks before that, I remember going to Burlington House, which is the headquarters of the RSC in London, traveling from Cambridge on the train, and I was huge, right, with twins, and I went in the underground to record a webinar in Burlington House, and that was an interesting trip, because it took me twice the amount of time, because I was so slow walking. But anyway, it is what it is. So
You
yeah,
managed
I am
to-
thankful for the support that I received from RSC as well through my pregnancy and after that.
You're here with me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast. If you like what you hear, please rate us on your favourite podcast platform. Yeah, I think it's pretty impressive. Two children all at once and 4 magazines, and you did it all seamlessly.
Well, I don't know about that, but yes, it was done. That's the thing.
Seamless. It looked seamless from our point of view. So then after 6 years, you said at the RSC Chemistry World, and all the fun that goes along with that, suddenly it was time to make a move again.
Yeah.
This time to the rival, for goodness sake, or is it a rival? But the equivalent across the pond, the American Chemical Society, and their in-house magazine, the Chemical and Engineering News.
Right.
What I can remember thinking at the time, what are you thinking? Don't leave us.
Yeah, well, it was a difficult decision, because I was really happy at the RSC, but it was an opportunity to work in a different country, a whole different continent, right? A much larger society from the point of view of the membership base. The RSC has about 50,000 members, 50,000 plus, and ACS has 150,000. So 3 times the size of the membership. And in terms of the team, although I went from managing 4 titles to managing just the one, Chemical and Engineering News, it had a very broad portfolio in terms of webinars and newsletters and all that kind of thing. Actually, they didn't have newsletters at the time. That's one of the things that I started. So the portfolio became bigger as I came in. But it was a large team. It was 55 people at the time, all across the world, including China, Germany, the UK, and then all across the United States, and also being responsible certainly for the editorial side, but also for the production side, which included all the copy editors, proofreaders, production editors, but also the web and creative side. So the designers, art directors, UX experts, so the people who were uploading stories to the web and designing the website and all that, they kind of like came under me. So that was a great experience, because I love the multidisciplinarity, and I really enjoyed having people across the world. I'll tell you that it was really interesting because our team was one of the few that was operating across multiple time zones, and that forced us to look at technologies very, very early on to make sure that we could communicate seamlessly and quickly, because of course we had a weekly publication schedule. We were publishing a magazine every week, which they still do to this day, in print and web, and then uploading stories every day continuously, right? So from that perspective, you need to be in touch with people regardless of time zone, anytime. So we were very early adopters of Slack, which is a messaging system. We had everything on the cloud. We had transparency in terms of the processes and who was doing what. So, if a guy in China filed a story, then it would go to the first editor who was in San Francisco, and then it would be proofread by a copy editor in Chicago. That kind of thing. There had to be transparency so that we knew where the story was and who was looking after it, so things could be moving along. So from that perspective, when COVID came, for example, my team were totally ready. On Friday, we decided, okay, on Monday we're not coming in because this is dangerous. We need to look after ourselves and the team, and it was totally seamless. The only thing that we had to do was purchase some of these like bigger screens for people to have at home. That was the only thing, and it was just that kind of like we'll just buy them and send them over, but no dramas, no things falling through the cracks. We just did it because of course we have been doing it for a long time. So anyway, I'm kind of like going a little bit on a
not at all
off on a tangent, but I really enjoyed that the multidisciplinarity, the different geographies. The team was diverse. I mean, of course, I'm from Spain, living in England for 17 years, and then going into the US. So I'm speaking British English, and they don't understand a word I'm saying, and all that kind of like gelling was happening, with people working across the world. So that was fantastic. It was really funny because like when we were having like brainstorming meetings and stuff like that, I would say things like, oh, that's a cracking idea. And they're looking at me like, cracking sounds breaking or broken. That's not a really good thing. I said, no, it's the opposite, cracking. The Irish say this is really good. or the opposite, pants. Oh, that's pants. You don't want to do that. Really? Underpants? What are you talking about? So anyway, there was a lot of kind of like,
crossover. That are very English things to say, I guess.
Right, exactly, yes.
Do you speak American English now?
No. I have I have a very thick Spanish accent, of course, but I speak as I learned English in Britain. I use a lot of the expressions that they use over there. The only thing that I would attribute to the American way of talking that I use is awesome. That's awesome, because here they say it all the time, and I do use it. But I think that's about the only thing that I have kind of extracted from the American language. So yeah,
that's good. So how long is it now? If you were at I can't remember when you left. I can't remember when you said you left. Was it 2014?
Yeah. I started at the ACS December the 1st, 2014, and until this last December, so which was 2022. So it's eight years with the organization. Yeah.
Yeah. And that has recently come to a conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That was the December. I no longer work for ACS. Now I am a visiting professor at Stony Brook University, which is a public university in New York. And I also do some consultancy for a number of organizations, just helping them, I guess, that either accelerate their business, and by business I mean very generally, like certainly the financial side. I'm helping some organizations with that, but also their operations, streamlining there. So I guess that accelerating their businesses or improving their businesses. A lot of streamlining, a lot of let's stop doing things that don't move the needle. Let's do impactful things that members can feel and notice and benefit from. So yeah, that has been really interesting. I mean, it's certainly, you know, good to work for academia, but then also on the consultancy side, seeing how different organizations operate. You know, there's different speeds, different priorities. They attract completely different people. So, you know, like societies have more, I don't know, kind of like internal approvals. And those kinds of things, they can be, you know, slowed down quite a lot by that. In some cases, you know, you have this idea of paralysis by analysis or whatever. Like they, you know, like they constantly need more data, and you know, you have good people have experience, and you have good data because you survey your members. You need to marry those two together, and you know, empower them to go and do things, and that comes less naturally to societies and associations that it does to the commercial side. On the commercial side, things happen a lot quicker, and you have, you know, very entrepreneurial individuals. But I would say that at the same time, you know, they can be, or there's a risk that they can be less rigorous about some of the processes as well. So it has been really interesting to witness that and see how they prioritize those things in different ways. So I've really enjoyed it so far.
I guess, and that I mean that rigorousness that you mentioned in the commercial side, I don't know in the consultancy, but certainly with the magazines, that that will come into play wherever you are. The editorial integrity, I mean, it's quite a crucial part of maintaining that. And it struck me recently, I noticed not everyone really understands the importance of editorial integrity, and I wondered if you could just give us your take on that, and why it is from your perspective that it is so crucial.
Yeah, I think to me, the editorial integrity or editorial independence, they're slightly different things, but very, very closely related, is probably the most important thing that publications like Chemical Engineering News or Chemistry World have, because it's all about credibility with the members, the readers, existing and potential readers and members. You know, the chemical industry, and you know, chemical industry is not it is huge, and then there's the pharmaceutical industry and biotech. I mean, the field that we serve, the Royal Society of Chemistry and American Chemical Society, and you know, and societies like that, is absolutely huge, but it's also so complex, and there's a lot of different interests within that. If you think about how drugs are made, and you know, all of you know, the whole process for a drug from, you know, from ideation and, you know, through clinical trials and then reaching the market. You know, in the chemical manufacturing, think about sustainability and the environment and those kinds of things, and how some, you know, organizations have had, you know, perhaps not a very good track record, and you know, they're trying to make amends, and then there's, you know, lawsuits and that kind of thing, and then there's the public perception of science and chemistry in general, you know, chemophobia, and how, you know, people equate the word chemical with man-made, when, you know, chemicals, we're all chemicals, right? You're made out of chemicals. We breathe chemicals all the time. We survive thanks to chemicals. It's such a complex field. I mean, the chemical sciences in general, you have to be really, you have to have a lot of integrity in terms of how you talk about your science, and how you present it to, certainly, your closest audiences, which are the practitioners of chemistry and chemical engineering. And then there's the public, who may be exposed to some of your, you know, content, your stories, and, you know, webinars, newsletters, and that kind of thing. And if you don't create stories that have rigor, that are independent, so that they're not influenced by either, you know, the chemical companies, or the, you know, societies that we serve, or the members even, right? you know, it can be really problematic because then you lose the credibility. And if I think actually COVID is a really good example where, you know, people, and this was, you know, chemists, but also members of the general public, they were really hungry for organizations that would talk about the, you know, what was happening in a way that is independent and rigorous, because it was life saving, right? So you know, at this point I was at the ACS, and we were writing stories about, I mean, this is at the early days of the pandemic. We were writing stories about disinfectants and how they work and are they effective against the spread of COVID. We also wrote about the masks, and which masks were again effective and which ones were not, and why it was important to use them, and that kind of thing. And our usage went through the roof, like multiple times the regular usage that we had. And I believe that a lot of people were coming to us, chemical and engineering news, because the association with the American Chemical Society, and I'm sure the same happened to chemistry world. And you know, in a way they were trusting us because we are an independent organization that reports, you know, independently about the spread of the disease and the, you know, the disinfectants and all of that. And people were very scared. So, you know, I mean, that's an extreme example of why it is important. But when you're talking about the environment and, you know, people suffering from COPD or asthma, you know, in places like India or even the UK, right? And, you know, potentially dying from, you know, pollution, you need to understand how pollution works and who is polluting and how can you stop that from happening. And I think the independence is crucial to be able to do that authoritatively and rigorously, and in a way that you build the trust with the readers. And so independence and integrity are at the core of that.
I completely agree. It's really nice to hear you say it and give those examples as well, because there's so much scope for publication nowadays in new ways, and it's so important that people understand that certain outlets are different and they do have credibility for very good reason, and that can feed into people's thought process, perhaps.
I agree with you, and I think that, you know, there's so much happening in terms of, you know, AI and misinformation and disinformation, and, you know, some bad actors, I guess, that are flooding our you know, the internet and our, I guess, the channels with incorrect information, misleading, on purpose, right? And then some not so much on purpose, but I think that the result is the same. And I think that it's becoming more and more important to make sure that independence is not hurt in any way, because I think that the new technologies are making it harder. Certainly this a greater volume of bad content, if you want to call it that, or not good enough. And I think it's just going to get worse, and it's going to get harder in terms of differentiating the good from the bad. So I think that, you know, it may get worse before it gets better. So I think that is a worrying development for sure.
I mean, theoretically, the independent magazines can have their heyday. We thought we'd had it, but it could be in the future, because if it's going to get worse before it's going to get better, then people will be seeking something they can trust. Ultimately, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It'll be interesting. I mean, I wonder if there will be something, you know, like, for example, in the UK where you have the BBC. I mean, although I guess that you could argue that, you know, how independent it is. I don't know. Maybe in the old times it was more independent than it is today. I don't know, because I haven't lived there for some time. But, you know, almost kind of like having that seal of approval where, you know, there's a number of media organizations that are independent. You know, it could be that we get into that situation where there's some kind of verification status or something like that, where you know, people can actually clearly see whether there's interference from either governments, or, you know, politicians or organizations, you know, like corporations and stuff like that. Maybe there's some kind of like system developed in the future that allows us, you know, as consumers of information, to discern between what is independent and rigorous and what isn't.
I think we're just going to have to learn it all. I think we're going to have to learn enough about everything so we're literate, and we can be discerning, because otherwise we'll have people infiltrating these organizations and they'll have agendas, and how do we stop that?
Mm.
I'm not sure. We need democracy to do its job, I suppose. So let's hope that does the trick.
Yeah.
Um, and unless it's Brexit, obviously. You said you could talk about Brexit.
Well, I don't know. To me, as somebody who went to the UK to study, and then I stayed there for many years, and my family are British, and it is my second home. Well, now I couldn't really go to the UK and just work there. I would have to apply for a permit, and even when I travel with my kids, and if we go to Spain or we go to the UK, they have to stand in a different line from me, because I'm a European citizen and they're not. And I think that that's very silly, and I think is hurtful, because we're so close, and the UK is such an important part of Europe, and there's so many people. I mean, certainly in Spain, people that immigrated, to enjoy their last, few years in the sun, and now, they have traveled to get healthcare and all those kinds of things. Is I don't know. I think, to me, it's 2023. We should be closer as people, as humans, and not further apart. And I think that this divisiveness is unhelpful and harmful to society. So yeah, I'm totally against the UK leaving the European Union. Yeah,
I'd like to think, I'd like to think we could even, even if we're not in the political, in political alignment, or on the pitch, as it were, we could at least get rid of the divisive things like different queues. I think the different queues is a little bit unnecessary. I can't see why that's helpful or relevant.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I'm sure there are lot more things that affect the day to day that I'm sure people would agree with you on. That it's made things a little bit more complicated. I think there have been. I'm not sure how we're going to move through that. We'll just have to wait and see.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to push you anymore, but on the Brexit point in politics. But I mean, like from a scientific point of view, is there anything more that you could that you'd like to see? I mean, we've just been reintroduced to Horizon 2020, so that's a relief.
Right. Yeah.
But anything else science-wise that we could just, if we could just do that.
Yeah. I saw that. Yeah. I mean, I think that it is unhelpful, because before there were no restrictions, and others restrictions, or processes. Again, for the UK, when I was living in Manchester, for example, and doing my PhD, there were many people who were doing PhDs at the same time as me, and many were from Spain, Greece, France, Germany, and of course British people, and we were all together trying to communicate with each other in clearly, and it was fascinating, and I think it was very diverse, and it was very helpful, because we were learning from each other and helping each other, and it was a kind of like a melting pot. And now that it is harder to have that, because the environment is less friendly for a large proportion of those people, who will certainly have more difficulty, securing, permits to live in the country. But there may be also some, they may be discouraged by, certain behaviors. Yeah, it's always, I mean, I lived in the UK for 17 years, and I absolutely love it. And I've lived now in the US since 2014. And being foreign is not always is not always great. And when like decisions by the government make it harder, you feel less welcome. And sometimes it is at the kind of like the macro level. Sometimes it can be at the micro, because some people will reflect the policies and the divisiveness that is being fed to them from the governments. And there may be some instances of microaggressions and stuff like that. So I mean, in the US, I'll tell you, for example, I've received a few, right, where I was, when I got the job at the American Chemical Society, I received a phone call by somebody who wanted to ask me about my immigration status in the United States. He was particularly offended by a story that we wrote because of the way that we referred to the president at the time, which was within our house style to refer to them like that. So we use the same treatment for all the presidents. So, but he
Which
didn't think
was?
that was, well, it was Trump. So typically the house style is that the first time you refer to the president in the story, you say President Donald J. Trump or President Barack Obama. I don't know if he has a middle name. And we always do that, but then every reference thereafter is just the surname. So it would be Obama or Trump or, whatever. But of course, this person didn't like that we were referring to President Trump as Trump. So he called me to tell me that. And then, of course, noticed that I am a woman and also foreign. So he asked me about my status in the United States and, how was I qualified to do my job? and then it kind of like degenerated into asking me if I knew who the 16th president of the United States was, whether I knew how many people died in the 9/11 attacks, and then it kind of like went from there. So that happens, and when you have politicians and governments that are making decisions that segregate or separate people, like I believe Brexit has done, maybe those people are encouraged to do that more often. So yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. We're all humans, and we're all trying to make a living and finding a way to support our families. So I think that some basic respect should be granted for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of the divisive nature of a lot of things are wearing thin on people at the moment, and it's quite obvious why. So moving on then just to the future, and let's hope it's a slightly better future and it doesn't get too much worse before it gets better. But if you could have your way, I don't know, we could pick AI, we could pick politics, but if you could have your way, what would it really look like? How would we move forward here, and what's the big vision for the future?
Well, I think it's going to be amazing. I think, a lot of people are scared or worried about artificial intelligence and those kinds of things. But, people were also scared about when the internet started and, when we first started using computers, and all of a sudden we were all going to, our legs will shorten because we're not walking anymore, and our hands would be, like really silly stuff like that. Or think about the printing press, right? I mean, however many 100 years ago, and all the book burning and that kind of thing. I think technological advances are always scary, and very often they go before any kind of like before the population can really understand the implications and what they mean, and before we can even develop some kind of like ethics around the usage of the technologies. For example, if you think about genetically modified foods, and now CRISPR, for example, which is a means of genetic modification, that is a really clear example that has happened in the last few decades, where it's a useful technology. We need to think about how we can use it in a way that is ethical and that it helps us and it doesn't harm people or the environment. And I think that there's an opportunity to do that with AI, and there's lots of cases of AI being used for better, quicker diagnosis of disease, for example, in terms of cancer treatments and stuff like that. There, and AI can be super accurate and can look at diagnosis very, very quickly. So in a way, the human is doing quality control versus doing all the work, right? So I think the future is bright. I think that, from a chemistry perspective, I think AI is going to help a lot in terms of the field of, drug development. So we will have drugs, quicker and cheaper, of course, which is great. We will have machines in the lab working 24/7. We already have them. and they will be performing, tasks. We will be using, certainly 3D printing is another technology that is kind of very widespread these days. All kinds of like visualization technologies, like the Google glasses a while back, and
Other
and
glasses
all that.
are available.
Yeah, I think that will be fantastic. Smart speakers in labs, and having conversations with robots, and things like that, so that processes happen seamlessly without having to touch things, but human directed. I think it's going to be fantastic, where we're going to be hopefully released of many tasks that are repetitive, menial, perhaps, again, a machine can do better, and we can concentrate on, the creative side that I think, humans are unique at doing. We can think about, the long term and how we want to change the world, and how do we use technology to do that, when we, really can concentrate on, having those kinds of thoughts versus, like setting up an experiment that is going to take 20 hours, and you have to do a lot of washing and cleaning, which is what we used to do in my time, right? So yeah, I think it's going to be super exciting, and technology is going to be really underpinning a lot of the these developments, and accelerating the way we do science. Yeah.
Good. That really is cheering. You paint a very nice picture, Bibi. It made me laugh when you said about people thinking that our legs were going to shrivel up when we got computers and we wouldn't have to go anywhere. And there's no fear. And it just reminded me of something that you've done that really is marvelous, that isn't chemistry related, that I just think needs a little shout out. And your weightlifting. You're
Oh yes.
Are you still doing weightlifting?
No, I actually stopped because of the pandemic, actually, and then I never got back into it. Maybe I should. I should now. That I'm
You're a
getting a little bit
champion. You set
older.
records.
Yes, yes, yes. So I started doing power lifting in 2015, and by 2016 I participated in one competition, and I broke a world record in deadlift. I lifted 321 pounds, and I have a certificate somewhere in this room, hanging there. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's incredible.
It was pretty impressive. I tell people so that I can scare them a little bit.
I think it's wise. Keep that feather in your cap. Thank you so much, Bibi. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you. I'm really glad you were able to join us from Washington, for heaven's sake.
It's my pleasure.
It's really great.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.